My name is Jacob Mercer, and I am 47 years old. I have spent more than half my life in uniform, tucked inside the logistics branch where most people think nothing interesting ever happens. I learned early that the spotlight in the military rarely shines on the guy pushing supply forms or tracking inventory in a dim office on base. I grew up around soldiers, so none of this surprised me. My father served in the infantry, and my older brother went straight into aviation, leaving me as the quiet kid who memorized serial numbers and cleaned up everyone's paperwork when no one else felt like dealing with the boring parts. I never minded it because I was good at it, and being useful has always felt better than trying to look heroic. By the time I made it to Texas and joined the logistics command there, I already understood my place in the machine. The base was hot, loud, and full of the kind of men and women who lived for the field, while I slipped into back offices filled with humming printers and metal cabinets that smelled like dust. I handled supply chain's vendor requests and all the tiny moving pieces that let the big missions run smoothly. People rarely noticed me unless something went wrong. Most days I saw the same look in their eyes, a quick glance past me to the door like they were searching for someone who mattered more. It used to sting when I was younger, but over the years it settled into something duller, a quiet understanding that some roles are meant to be invisible. I accepted it because the work still felt honest. Every now and then I watched the younger guys fresh out of training strut through the hallways, with their chests up talking about the next deployment or the last firefight they knew nothing about. They loved the high-energy stories and the medals pinned on other people's uniforms. No one ever asked how the supplies reached the right place, or how the paperwork kept the chaos from turning into disaster. That was my world, steady and thankless. Still, I stayed. I showed up early, left late, and carried the weight of responsibility that came with being the one who understood the system better than most. I told myself that being overlooked was not the same as being unimportant. Deep down, I believed that every machine needs someone in the shadows to keep it from falling apart, even if no one sees the hands doing the work. I was fine living that way, quiet and steady, until the day the system tried to pretend I was never there. It started on a Tuesday, the kind of quiet day when nothing's supposed to go wrong. I was clearing out my inbox, sorting through the usual stack of vendor applications, when one packet caught my eye. The formatting was perfect, the forms aligned just right, the scanned documents clean to the point of looking artificial. At first glance, there was nothing wrong, but something in my gut told me to slow down. Military procurement isn't neat. It's sloppy, rushed, signed under pressure, and often smells faintly like sweat and printer ink. This file felt sterile. The tax ID number was a clean string, no clerical errors, no smudged copies. The vendor's address was a base in North Dakota that had been decommissioned 2 years ago, and yet here it was listed as their active logistics hub. I checked the contact field. No phone. Just an email ending in a vague domain name with no encryption protocols. Still, I didn't raise a flag. Not yet. I opened our internal verification system, keyed in the EIN, and waited. The screen blinked, then flashed red. Duplicate. The same number already tied to a supplier from Nevada I had cleared last quarter. That one had seemed fine back then, but now I wasn't so sure. I scrolled down, looking for signatures. The approval section had one. Just initials. No rank. No review stamp from the finance chain. Whoever filed this had skipped 2 layers of verification, which wasn't just sloppy. It was deliberate. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling for a few seconds. These things happen, I told myself. Admin errors misfile someone in a rush to meet end-of-month quotas. But my gut wouldn't let go. I pulled out a notepad I kept in my desk drawer and started jotting things down. IN duplication. Non-existent base. No backup documentation. I ran a search through our archived vendor logs. The system was sluggish, like it didn't want to give up the answers. After a few minutes, I found something worse than what I expected. 3 vendors, different names, identical formatting. All of them had blank phone fields, vague mission descriptions and addresses, that led to P.O. boxes or empty lots. And every single one of them had been greenlit by the same person. I didn't know him well, just his name on memos and a few team briefings. Major Keene. He was new transferred from Procurement HQ and had a reputation for cutting through red tape. Most folks saw that as a good thing. Now I wasn't so sure. I saved screenshots and flagged the entries, but kept it internal. No emails yet. No accusations. Just a folder quietly labeled Echo and tucked into my review directory. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I'd been around long enough to know that bad paperwork didn't always mean bad intent. Sometimes it was just incompetence. But this was too careful, too polished, and too damn clean. Like someone wanted to leave no fingerprints, but didn't realize I still knew what smudges looked like. The weird thing is, I almost missed it. If I'd been tired, if I'd clicked approve without looking twice, it would have slipped right through. But that day, for whatever reason, I was alert. Maybe because I'd been ignored so long, I'd trained myself to catch what others missed. Maybe because someone needed to. Either way, I knew I couldn't unsee it. I'd found something that didn't belong. And once you find a crack in the wall, you start pressing, just to see how far it goes. The first time I brought it up, I kept my voice level. Just a simple question during a logistics sync asking why a vendor's tax ID showed up on 2 separate contracts under different names. The room went quiet for a beat, then someone chuckled like I had just misread a number on a form. I looked across the table, expecting someone to back me up, maybe ask to double check. But instead, I got that look. The one that says you've crossed a line you didn't know was there. Later that day, I found myself pulled aside by a captain I barely spoke to. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Said I was probably just overthinking things, that I should trust the process. The next morning, my access to the contract audit logs had been restricted. No explanation, no note, just gone. At first, I thought it was a system glitch. I sent a polite request to IT. Got a generic response about restructuring user permissions. That same afternoon, I noticed I wasn't on the invite list for the weekly procurement call. I checked again. My name wasn't there. Then the whispering started. Not loud, not obvious. Just people falling silent when I walked into a room. Conversations shifted. Emails stopped seeing me. I had become a ghost in a unit where I used to be the guy everyone came to when they wanted something done right. I asked Major Keene directly during a budget review why 3 vendors were using the same P.O. box across different states. He didn't even blink. Said logistics was messy and vendors were consolidating. I pressed once more, and that's when it happened. He leaned back, looked me dead in the eye, and said it clear enough for everyone to hear. You're not here to investigate. You're here to verify. Then he smiled and moved on like nothing happened. The message was loud. Stay in your lane. It sat with me all day, that line. I went back to my office and stared at the wall for a long time, trying to make sense of it. I'd served over 20 years, built systems, from the ground up, fixed supply chain failures overseas, and now I was being told to shut up and stomp approvals. I didn't say anything at first. Not out loud. I just stopped talking in meetings, stopped offering insights, stopped raising my hand. No one seemed to mind. They acted like they had been waiting for me to finally quiet down. One morning I got to my desk and saw someone had moved the shared folders around. The files I curated were under someone else's name. A younger analyst who smiled too much and double-clicked, like every file was a surprise. I said nothing. I just started keeping my own notes. It's a strange thing being invisible in a place where you used to be essential. You start to wonder if the silence is your fault. If maybe you were too rigid, too careful, too much of a rule follower in a system that had stopped caring. But deep down, I knew it wasn't me who changed. It was them. They had shifted the rules and turned quiet diligence into a liability. They didn't want clean. They wanted fast. And they wanted quiet compliance. Every night, I left the office with my jaw clenched. Every morning I showed up a little earlier, just to feel like I was still part of something. But the walls had closed in. I wasn't part of the team anymore. I was just a reminder of the things they wanted to ignore. It started with a single screenshot. A vendor approval form signed off with no counter-signature uploaded after midnight. I saved it quietly, renamed the file with a neutral string of numbers, and tucked it into a folder buried deep inside a shared directory no one ever looked at. The name came to me as I stared out the window of my office one evening. Operation Iron Dust. Something about it felt right. Dust gets into everything. Slowly, quietly, and without notice. Just like I planned to. Each night, I added one more piece. A flagged invoice with mismatched shipping dates. A Slack thread where I was told to drop a question. A blurry photo of a conference badge that linked a contractor to a known shell company. All of it went into Iron Dust, labeled cross-referenced and time-stamped. I didn't rush. I didn't vent. I just watched and collected. If someone passed me over in a meeting, I made a note. If a financial record didn't match the logistics log, I took a screenshot. If a name showed up twice on different vendor profiles, with different states, it got logged. Every entry was backed up. I had a mirrored copy saved offline, encrypted and renamed. One on a drive in my bottom drawer. Another uploaded through a private link to a server I paid for out of pocket. I wasn't building a case yet. I was building a pattern. The deeper I went, the more I saw. Missing audit trails. Documents signed on dates when systems were supposed to be frozen. Routing numbers that traced to accounts under fake LCs, formed in bulk across Delaware and Wyoming. At work, I played the role. Sat through briefings. Nodded when told to stay in my lane. I even let them think I was losing interest. Showed up late once or twice. Let my inbox pile up just enough to keep appearances. But Iron Dust kept growing. Each entry sharper than the last. Each file a puzzle piece someone didn't think I'd keep. And I never once named it in a memo or on a work device. The folder didn't exist unless you knew exactly where to look. That was the point. Quiet moves. Precise records. No drama. Just one man watching the cracks widen until the whole structure gave way. I hadn't spoken to Ethan Myers in over a year. Last time we crossed paths, he was being shuffled out during what they called a strategic rotation. Everyone knew he'd asked too many questions about budget allocations. He picked up on the second ring. No small talk, just silence that felt like recognition. I said one word. Holtbridge. He let out a breath. Then he said, "You found it too, didn't you?" I nodded even though he couldn't see me. We agreed to meet off base, just two guys grabbing coffee, nothing more. But when I slid my USB across the table, he didn't flinch. He had brought his own. We traded files like cards. My Iron Dust folder. His notes labeled Watchtower. Within 5 minutes, the pieces locked together like parts of the same broken machine. Identical vendor codes. Matching tax IDs. Signatures that had been recycled across contracts, months apart, but tied to the same shell addresses. He had the names I didn't. I had the dates he was missing. He flagged the same PO boxes. I found their registration in different states. Together it became something undeniable. He showed me an email thread from 6 months ago. Same fake vendor approval, same digital stamp, same higher-up pushing the paperwork fast. I pulled up mine. It was like reading the same story with different characters. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't misreading data. I was staring at the outline of something bigger. Ethan leaned back and said it like a statement, not a theory. Someone is running a ghost vendor loop with real cash. And they've done it across at least 3 bases. I didn't say anything, just nodded and clenched my jaw. We weren't imagining this. We were tracing it. That night I didn't sleep much. I stayed up refining Iron Dust. adding every piece Ethan had handed me, building new branches on what was now more than just a folder. It was proof. I had found a crack. Ethan showed me the rest of the fracture. Now I knew how wide it really ran. I wasn't alone. And I wasn't crazy. I was right. And that changed everything. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I sat alone in the kitchen, the lights overhead casting a pale blue glow on the Formica table. My laptop sat open in front of me, cursor blinking, waiting. The iron dust folder was complete. Every file was triple-checked, every timestamp verified, every document cross-referenced against Ethan's findings. I had copied it, twice encrypted each one, and stored them in separate locations. There was no anger left in me. Just a strange, steady kind of clarity. Like something had settled into place and was no longer moving. The coffee in my mug had gone cold, but I kept sipping it out of habit. My body was awake, but my mind felt like it had entered some quiet zone. No fear, no doubt, just focus. Tomorrow I would send everything. Direct to the Army's Criminal Investigation Division with a formal affidavit and a reference to Regulation Code 4.16. The one that required a federal review if credible fraud evidence was presented. It wouldn't be intercepted. That clause was buried in a handbook most officers hadn't read since basic. But I had. Twice. I looked around the room and let the silence stretch. This wasn't just about fake vendors anymore. It was about how easily silence spreads when people choose comfort over accountability. I had spent most of my life being invisible. Pushing papers, double-checking manifests, moving supplies from point A to B. Always in the background. Never asking for recognition. But that night, with the screen glowing and my hands still on the keys, I felt something shift. Not pride. Not satisfaction. Just resolve. They had built the fraud like a house of cards, trusting that no one would look too closely. I wasn't here to knock it down in anger. I was here to blow quietly through the foundation. I saved the last draft, signed it digitally, then locked the final version in the secure folder. All that was left was to hit send. But I waited. Just one more breath. One more still moment to sit in the calm before detonation. I wasn't scared. I wasn't shaking. I felt cleaner than I had in years. They had no idea what was coming, but I did. And I was ready. The message landed at 7:42 a.m. It was short. Subject line: Procurement, freeze, all systems on hold until further notice. Within the hour, the internal network crawled to a halt. Access to finance logs, vendor approvals, even basic shipment schedules went dark. Nobody said it aloud, but we all knew something big had dropped. People walked faster. Phones stayed in pockets. Officers who usually barked across the floor kept their heads down, voices low. Something had shifted, and it was spreading like a cold wind. By 9:00 a.m., the colonel who'd signed half the ghost vendor orders was gone. Not fired. Not escorted. Just absent. His office door stayed closed. No one knocked. At 9:15, the CID arrived in plain clothes. Not flashy. No shouting. Just a quiet group that moved like they knew exactly where they were going and what they were looking for. My inbox stayed silent. Not a single response to anything I'd sent before. No new memos. No fake encouragements about team culture or system upgrades. Just a vacuum. Around noon, someone pinned a printout to the bulletin board. It was a formal notice. Statement from command: ongoing investigation into procedural irregularities. Full cooperation required. More details to follow. That was it. No names. No blame. But no one smiled after reading it. The words were clean. The tension was not. You could hear chairs creaking, paper shuffling the occasional cough. All the usual bass noise faded to a low murmur, like the volume had been turned down on life itself. The ones who used to joke by the coffee machine stopped showing up. A few even took personal days without saying why. Eyes avoided mine in the hallway like I carried some kind of radiation. But I wasn't angry. I wasn't smug. I just kept moving. Watched. Logged. Waited. The calm was gone, but this wasn't chaos. It was a vacuum pulling everything into the light. The silence wasn't confusion. It was realization. They finally noticed, and that silence, that was the sound of power shifting. They didn't announce it with trumpets. There was no dramatic broadcast or press release. Just quiet fallout, one file at a time. First, the contracts. 6 vendors flagged frozen, and then blacklisted. The same names I had circled months ago were now gone from every active database. Then came the personnel notices. Reassignments, administrative leave, and in a few cases, full separation from duty. No explanations were given. No one asked. I watched it all from the same desk I'd sat at for years. Same worn-out chair, same coffee mug. But now, every time I opened my laptop, people noticed. The new compliance officer made rounds that week. She walked the halls like she was cataloging a crime scene. I gave her a small nod. She nodded back. 2 days later, I found a sealed envelope in my inbox from the Office of Military Ethics. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Just 5 sentences. We've reviewed the submitted evidence. Your efforts led to the exposure of systematic fraud. We thank you for your integrity. We stand with you. Stay vigilant. I read it twice, then tucked it into the back of my desk drawer. I didn't need a plaque, but it was good to know someone up there finally saw. The changes started slow. Updated verification procedures, cross-base audits, stricter controls on third-party vendors. People whispered about a new protocol called Mercer Watch. I didn't correct them. That Friday, my commander called me into his office. He didn't make eye contact, just slid a document across the table. It was an offer. A civilian oversight role under the Defense Logistics Agency. 6 figures. Remote, optional, unlimited clearance. I took it home, sat at the kitchen table again just like I had before all of this started. The lights were still cold. The coffee still bitter. But something in the air felt different. I wasn't the guy they overlooked anymore. I wasn't just the paper pusher. I was the one who saw what no one wanted to admit and did something about it. The base moved on. New officers came in. Some of the old ones were quietly phased out, but everyone walked a little softer. Read contracts twice. Looked over their shoulders just once more than usual. Sometimes people would glance at me like they weren't sure what to say. A few even said thank you under their breath. I didn't respond. I wasn't here for that. I didn't set the building on fire. I just lit the match. The structure was already dry. The lies had been piling up for years. Now it was clean. Or at least cleaner. That was enough. I live quiet now. Work from home, help an independent audit group, tighten the cracks before someone else slips through. No applause. No medals. But the coffee tastes better, and the silence no longer bites. I don't check my inbox with dread anymore. Don't flinch when someone asks to see old paperwork. I sleep fine. Not proud, not smug, just clean. Sometimes I get messages from younger officers. They ask if it was worth it, if I'd do it again. I don't answer with big speeches. I just say this. If you see something wrong, speak up. Maybe not loud. Maybe not right away. But don't carry the weight of silence. Truth doesn't scream. It waits. And when you finally let it out, it changes things. Even if no one claps. Even if no one remembers your name. This story isn't about revenge. It's about responsibility. about knowing when enough is enough and trusting your gut when everyone else turns their back. So if you're watching this and wondering what to do, ask yourself one thing. Can you sleep knowing what you saw? I couldn't. That's why I opened the file instead of closing my mouth. And that made all the difference.